The sun was a hammer, relentless and unforgiving, pounding the flat, cracked earth into submission. Sarah stumbled, her worn boots kicking up dust devils that swirled briefly before dissipating back into the shimmering, cool air. Each breath was a gasp of hot, dry dust that seared her throat and burned in her lungs. It had been days, maybe weeks. The passage of time had blurred into a single, agonizing stretch of heat, thirst, and a gnawing, desperate hope. Hope for what, she no longer knew, just survival. For the life pressing heavy and insistent within her. 6 months gone, maybe more. Her belly was a tight, aching drum, a constant reminder of the burden she carried, the reason she pushed on when her legs screamed for her to stop, when her mind blurred with exhaustion. The wagon had broken 2 days back, the wheel splintering on a hidden rock like a gunshot. Ben had tried to fix it, his hands raw and bleeding, cursing the land he had promised would be their future. He'd gone ahead, searching for help, for water, anything. He'd left her the canteen, meagerly filled, and the promise he'd be back before sunup. That had been 3 sunups ago. The canteen was empty now, the leather strap digging into her shoulder. Her tongue was thick and swollen, clinging to the roof of her mouth. Sweat had long since stopped beading on her skin, leaving it taut and dry like sun-baked clay. The heat had taken everything, her moisture, her strength, her will, leaving only the stubborn, primal need to keep moving, to protect the fragile life inside. She saw things in the heat haze now. Water, pooling under distant, non-existent trees. A wagon, miraculously intact, waiting just over the next rise. People, waving to her. Each mirage dissolved into the mocking, empty landscape as she drew closer, leaving her more defeated than before. Her feet were raw, blistered inside the stiff leather boots. She had wrapped them in strips torn from her petticoat days ago, but the cloth was soaked with sweat and dirt, offering little protection. Each step was a fresh agony, sending jolts up her shins to her aching knees. She whispered Ben's name, but the sound was a dry rasp, swallowed immediately by the vast, indifferent silence of the desert. Had he made it? Or had the land claimed him too, just as it had claimed their meager savings, their hope for a new life, their strength? A wave of dizziness washed over her, forcing her to her knees. The sand was scorching hot through her thin dress, burning her palms as she steadied herself. She bowed her head, the wide brim of her sunbonnet doing little against the oppressive glare. A tear escaped, cutting a clean path through the grime on her cheek, a stark, impossible stream in this dry, thirsty world. She couldn't stop, not now, not with the baby. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, she pushed herself back up. Standing upright felt like a monumental achievement, her body a shaky tower of bone and muscle, protesting every degree of elevation. The horizon wavered, a hazy line between the bleached sky and the bleached earth. There was nothing, nothing but endless, shimmering space. She took another step, then another, her vision tunneled, the edges fading to black. The sound of her own ragged breathing filled her ears, loud and desperate. She tried to focus on the next rock, the next sparse bush, anything to anchor herself to reality. The ground tilted. Not a mirage this time, but her own failing balance. She swayed, her arms flailing uselessly. The canteen slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the sand with a soft, insignificant thud. She watched it fall as if from a great distance, unable to react. Then, the heat consumed her. The hammered ground rose up to meet her, a brutal, final embrace. Blackness closed in, thick and suffocating, pulling her down into a silence deeper and more terrifying than the desert's own. The last sensation was the burning heat against her cheek, the taste of dust and despair, and the faint, desperate hope that the life inside her might somehow, impossibly, survive. Darkness, blessed, cool darkness, a respite from the brutal sun. Sarah drifted, somewhere between sleeping and waking, between life and death. There were faint sounds, a gentle murmur, the rustle of fabric, a cool dampness against her lips. She swallowed instinctively, the relief a sharp, exquisite pain in her parched throat. Water. Real water. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt heavy, glued shut. A cool hand touched her forehead, then her cheek. The touch was firm, calloused, not gentle like Ben's had been, but capable. It felt different. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of exhaustion. Not Ben. Who? She forced her eyes open, squinting against a light that was softer than the sun's hammer. She was indoors, in a structure she didn't recognize. The walls were made of woven reeds or mats, the ceiling sloped and supported by wooden poles. It was dim, blessedly cool. She lay on a soft hide, covered by a light blanket. A figure knelt beside her, a woman, but not a white woman. Sarah's breath hitched. She had heard stories, terrifying stories whispered around campfires, cautionary tales of what lay beyond the settlements. Savages, cruel, merciless heathens. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. The woman was watching her, her dark eyes calm and steady, unreadable. She was older than Sarah, her face etched with lines that spoke of sun and hardship, but also resilience. Her hair was dark, pulled back in braids. Her clothes were unfamiliar, made of soft buckskin adorned with simple beadwork. She was Indian. Panic flared, sharp and immediate. Sarah tried to push herself up, but her body refused, weak and trembling. A low groan escaped her lips. The woman placed a hand gently on her shoulder, holding her down. Her touch was unexpected, neither threatening nor entirely comforting, just still. She spoke, her voice low and quiet, the words a strange melodic stream Sarah didn't understand. It wasn't English, it was the tongue of this land, of the people who belonged to it. Sarah could only stare, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She was at their mercy, the mercy of those she had been taught to fear, to despise, to see as an obstacle to progress, to civilization. She thought of Ben, of their lost wagon, of the life they had been building. It felt impossibly far away, like a dream that had evaporated in the heat. The woman reached for a small bowl and dipped a piece of soft cloth into it. She raised it to Sarah's lips. Sarah hesitated, her mind screaming caution, but her body craved moisture. The woman waited patiently, her eyes still on Sarah's face. Desperation won. Sarah parted her lips, and the cool, slightly bitter liquid trickled in. It was water, but flavored with something herbal, earthy. She swallowed greedily, the woman offering more, slowly, carefully. When she had enough, the woman lowered the cloth and took the bowl away. She looked at Sarah's distended belly, her gaze lingering for a moment. There was something in her expression then, a flicker that Sarah couldn't quite decipher. Not pity, not cruelty, something else. Recognition? Understanding? The woman spoke again, a few soft words, then turned and moved silently away, disappearing into the dimness of the dwelling. Sarah watched her go, every nerve ending screaming alertness, fear battling with the overwhelming relief of being out of the sun, of having water, of being, for now at least, alive. She lay there, listening to the unfamiliar sounds outside, the gentle flap of the dwelling covering in the breeze, the distant bleating of goats, the faint murmur of other voices. She was in their camp. Alone amongst them. A white woman, pregnant, vulnerable. The stories she had heard flooded her mind, tales of scalping, of cruelty, of violence. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears prickling at the corners. Had Ben been caught? Was she next? The woman returned shortly, carrying a piece of dried meat and a small bowl of berries. She offered them to Sarah. Sarah hesitated again, but her hunger was a hollow ache. She took the food, her hand trembling slightly. The woman sat cross-legged a short distance away, watching her eat with that same quiet, unreadable gaze. The meat was tough but nourishing. The berries were sweet and tart, bursting with juice that soothed her dry mouth. She ate slowly, cautiously, acutely aware of the woman's presence. When she finished, the woman took the empty bowls. She didn't speak, just rose and moved about the dwelling, tidying, adjusting things. Sarah watched her, trying to glean something, anything from her movements, her expression. She seemed competent, purposeful, not the wild savage of the stories. But fear was deeply ingrained. It was the air she had breathed since they'd left the settlements, the constant companion on the trail west. Every rustle of leaves, every distant shout, had been a potential threat, and the stories, they had been so vivid, so terrifying. The woman settled down again, this time near the entrance, her back to Sarah. She seemed to be working on something in her hands, her fingers deft and quick. Sarah lay there, her body slowly recovering from the brutal assault of the desert heat, her mind racing. Should she try to escape, where would she go? She had nothing, knew nothing of this land, its hidden dangers. She looked at the woman's back. Was she a guard, or simply present? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions, with generations of conflict and mistrust. As the light outside softened, casting long shadows through the dwelling entrance, the woman turned slightly. She caught Sarah's eye. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Sarah saw the strength in the woman's posture, the weary wisdom in her eyes. The woman's gaze seemed to soften slightly as it rested on Sarah's belly, then lifted back to her face. She spoke again, slowly this time, her voice gentle. "Nahili," she said, tapping her chest. Sarah stared. Was she giving her name? Hesitantly, her throat still scratchy, Sarah managed to croak out, "Sarah." Nahili nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. She didn't repeat the name. The communication was minimal, functional. A simple introduction, a tentative bridge across a vast chasm of difference and fear. The night brought cooler air, a blessed relief. Sarah slept fitfully, waking often to the unfamiliar sounds, the consciousness of being surrounded by strangers. Yet each time she woke, she saw Nahili sitting near the entrance, a quiet, watchful presence. It wasn't the vigilant guard duty she had imagined, but something calmer, more settled. Over the next few days, Sarah slowly regained her strength. Nahili continued to care for her, bringing her food and water, tending to her blistered feet with a poultice of herbs that soothed the burning. Their interactions remained minimal, often silent. Nahili didn't ask questions Sarah couldn't answer, didn't push for explanations. She simply provided what was needed. Sarah watched her, her initial terror gradually giving way to a cautious curiosity. She observed Nahili's movements, her quiet efficiency. She saw the way the other people in the camp interacted with her, with respect, with affection. Nahili wasn't an outcast or a figure of fear within her own community. She was a woman of standing, perhaps a healer, or someone respected for her wisdom. One afternoon, as Nahili changed the dressing on Sarah's feet, she noticed the crude binding Sarah had used initially. She picked up the piece of fabric Sarah had torn from her petticoat, now stiff with sweat and dirt. Sarah felt a flush of shame at the poverty it represented, the desperation. Nahili held the fabric for a moment, then gently touched Sarah's belly. She spoke, a stream of her language, pointing to Sarah, to her belly, then gesturing outwards, making a rocking motion with her arms. Sarah didn't understand the words, but the gestures, the context, were clear. She was asking about the baby, about her journey, about being alone. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. The simple act of being seen, of being asked, even in a language she didn't know, was overwhelming. She managed to nod, a choked sound escaping her. She touched her belly. "Alone," she whispered, the English word foreign in this place. "Husband, lost." She made a gesture, pointing back the way she had come, then down, towards the ground. Nahili watched her, her expression softening. She nodded slowly, a profound understanding in her eyes. She spoke again, softly, touching her own chest, then gesturing out to the desert, the sun, the wind. Sarah felt a connection then, across the gulf of language and culture, a shared understanding of loss, of hardship, of the vast, indifferent power of the land. Nahili reached out and gently covered Sarah's hand on her belly with her own. Her hand was warm, strong. It was the first truly gentle touch Sarah had received since Ben had left. It broke something open inside her, a dam of fear and grief she had been holding back. She began to weep, quiet, ragged sobs that shook her body. Nahili didn't speak, didn't pull away. She simply stayed, her hand remaining on Sarah's, a silent anchor in the storm of her sorrow. As days turned into a week, Sarah grew stronger. She could walk short distances now, venturing cautiously outside the dwelling with Nahili's silent permission. She saw the life of the camp, the women tanning hides, weaving mats, tending to children, the men returning from hunts. The rhythm of their lives, dictated by the sun and the seasons, was foreign but held a quiet dignity. The children were the most curious. Dark-eyed, silent observers at first, they would eventually approach, peeking around their mother's skirts. Nahili's presence seemed to give them permission. One small boy, no older than 5, brought her a smooth, colorful stone one afternoon, dropping it into her palm before running back to his games. It was a small thing, but it felt like a monumental gesture of acceptance. Sarah tried to help with small tasks, folding hides, sorting berries, but her advanced pregnancy made her clumsy and slow. Nahili would gently take the task from her, offering her a quiet smile that reached her eyes. The initial fear Sarah had felt towards Nahili, towards all of them, had begun to dissipate, replaced by a tentative trust, a profound gratitude. She learned snippets of Nahili's language, simple words for water, food, sun, night. She learned to say Nahili's name, and Nahili would respond with a soft sound of acknowledgement. They communicated through gestures, through shared glances, through the quiet rhythm of their presence together. Nahili, in turn, seemed to learn to read Sarah. She would bring Sarah food when her stomach rumbled, offer her a hide to rest on when she looked tired, guide her steps when she walked outside. She had shown Sarah a small, cool spring nearby, a lifeline in this arid land. She taught Sarah how to spot certain plants, how to recognize the signs of changing weather. She was teaching Sarah how to survive in this world, her world. Sarah knew her presence was unusual, perhaps even risky, for Nahili and her people. She had overheard snippets of conversation amongst the older women, their glances towards her holding a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. There were those who still held deep mistrust, vivid memories of broken treaties, stolen land, violence. Sarah was a reminder of all they had suffered. Yet Nahili protected her, her quiet authority seemingly enough to keep the dissent at bay. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah sat outside the dwelling with Nahili. The air was finally cool, a soft breeze whispering through the camp. "Why?" Sarah asked, the single word hanging in the quiet air. Nahili turned to her, her expression calm. She waited. "Why, you help me?" Sarah struggled for the right words, gesturing to herself, then to Nahili. "White woman, you, enemy?" The word felt harsh, wrong now. Nahili looked out at the horizon for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was low, the English words careful and measured. "The land is cruel. It does not know friend or enemy. It knows life and death." She looked at Sarah's belly. "You carry life." She paused, her gaze distant. "I lost my little one long ago. The sickness." She touched her chest, a ghost of pain in her eyes. "I know the fear for the life inside." Sarah's breath caught. Loss, the shared language they both understood. Nahili, the woman Sarah had been taught to fear, had known the same devastating grief that had haunted Sarah since Ben's disappearance, that still lay heavy in her heart. She had lost a child. "Ben," Sarah whispered, her voice thick. "My husband, gone." She gestured to the desert again. "Lost." Nahili nodded slowly. "The land takes," she said. "It also gives." She looked at Sarah's belly again, then met her eyes. "Life finds a way." In that moment, the chasm between them shrank. They were two women, two mothers, bound by the universal experiences of love, loss, and the fierce instinct to protect the lives they carried or had carried. The labels, white woman, Indian, enemy, faded in the face of this shared humanity. But the fragile peace was not destined to last. The desert, as Nahili said, was cruel, and the outside world had a long memory. It was midday when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon, growing steadily larger, heading towards the camp. Sarah, who was resting inside the dwelling, felt a sudden tension in the air outside. Voices rose, sharp and concerned. Nahili came quickly into the dwelling, her face grim. "Riders," she said, her English clipped. "Many." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. Riders? Was it Ben, miraculously returned with help? Or someone else? She scrambled to her feet, her body protesting the sudden movement. Nahili put a steadying hand on her arm. "Wait." The sounds from outside intensified. Shouts, the rhythmic beat of hooves, the jingle of harness. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through Sarah. It didn't sound like a friendly arrival. Nahili moved to the entrance, peering out, her body tensed. After a long moment, she turned back to Sarah, her eyes filled with a cold fury Sarah hadn't seen before. "They are not searchers," Nahili said, her voice hard. "They are takers, from the settlements, They ride hard, looking for. She paused, her gaze sweeping over Sarah. Looking for trouble, or something to take. Sarah's mind raced. Takers? Was it men like the Brodies, the ones who had tried to cheat Ben out of his claim back east, who had threatened them? Or just men looking for easy plunder in the wilderness? Why? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. They see us, weak, Nahili said. They see opportunity. She looked at Sarah. They see you, white woman, with us. Her meaning was starkly clear. Sarah's presence, once a symbol of her vulnerability, was now a potential flashpoint, a provocation. Shouts rose from outside, louder, closer. They were aggressive, demanding. Sarah recognized some of the words, slurred and angry. They were calling out, demanding they give up the squaw whore, who was hiding a white woman. The vile prejudice in the voices sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Nahili's face was a mask of resolve. She quickly gathered a few essential items, a water skin, some dried food, a knife, and thrust them into a small bag. You must go, she said, her voice urgent. Now, south, there is a canyon, hidden. Go? Alone? Sarah felt a fresh wave of panic. She was heavily pregnant, weak, knew nothing of the land. Not alone, Nahili said. She spoke rapidly in her own language to an older boy who stood near the entrance. He nodded, his eyes serious. Jarek will guide you. He knows the paths. But, your people? Sarah looked around the dwelling at the sounds of rising tension outside. My people will face them, Nahili said, her jaw set. We cannot let them take you here. It would bring greater harm. Her meaning was clear. They would fight to protect her, but it would likely lead to bloodshed for her presence. No, Sarah said, sudden resolve stiffening her spine. She couldn't be the cause of violence against the very people who had saved her. I'll tell them. I came to you. I was dying. They will not listen, Nahili said, her voice bleak. They do not see you. They see a reason for their hate, a claim. They will take you, and still they will take from us. She looked at Sarah, her eyes pleading. Go, hide, for the life you carry. The sounds of the approaching riders were right outside the camp now. The angry shouts, the thud of hooves slowing as they reached the perimeter. There was no time. Nahili grasped Sarah's arm, pulling her towards a hidden flap at the back of the dwelling. South, she repeated. Stay low. Do not make sound. Jarek knows the way. Sarah hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Her every instinct screamed fear of the unknown, of leaving the relative safety she had found. But she looked at Nahili's face, the desperate urgency there, the knowledge of the danger. She looked at Jarek, small but determined. And she thought of the baby, the life inside her that Nahili had protected. Go, Nahili urged, giving her a gentle push towards the opening. Sarah scrambled through the low opening, Jarek close behind her. They were in a narrow space between dwellings. The shouts from the front of the camp were loud now, angry, interspersed with the sharp, authoritative voices of the settlement men. Stay low, Jarek whispered in halting English, pulling Sarah down. They crept along the back of the camp, moving away from the sounds of confrontation. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. She could hear the raised voices, the threats, the rising tension. She heard Nahili's voice too, calm but firm, speaking in her own tongue, then a few sharp, clear words in English. They reached the edge of the camp, a sparse line of bushes. Jarek melted into the landscape, moving with an ease Sarah envied. He looked back at her, his expression serious. Come, he whispered, and began to move swiftly but silently through the low scrub, heading south. Sarah followed, her pregnant body awkward and slow. Each step was a struggle, her muscles screaming in protest. She stumbled often, catching herself on bushes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sun was still high, beating down on them, but her fear was a cold, clammy thing that made her shiver despite the heat. As they put more distance between themselves and the camp, the sounds of the confrontation faded, replaced by the vast, empty silence of the desert. Sarah risked a glance back. She could see the cluster of dwellings in the distance, figures moving around them. She couldn't tell what was happening, the distance too great, the heat haze distorting her view. But the thought of Nahili, standing against those men, filled her with a fierce, protective gratitude. Nahili, the enemy, was protecting her, a stranger, a white woman, at risk to herself and her people. Jarek led her expertly through the landscape, finding dips and rises that offered cover, navigating by landmarks Sarah couldn't even distinguish. He was silent, focused, a small, determined guide. Sarah trusted him implicitly, a stark contrast to her initial fear of his people. They walked for what felt like hours, the sun tracking across the sky. Sarah's strength waned rapidly. The fear that had propelled her began to recede, leaving her weak and exhausted. She stumbled, falling to her knees. Jarek stopped, turning back. His dark eyes were full of concern. He knelt beside her, offering her the water skin Nahili had given them. Sarah drank greedily, the water a lifeline. "Cannot, go on," Sarah whispered, shame burning her cheeks. She was failing the baby, failing Nahili, failing Jarek. Jarek looked at her, then at the sun, then back towards the north where the camp lay. He seemed to be making a decision. He pointed ahead. "Canyon," he said simply. "Close." He helped her to her feet, supporting her elbow. He didn't rush her, adjusting his pace to hers, patiently waiting when she needed to stop and rest, her hands braced on her knees, gasping for air. He was just a boy, but he moved with the quiet strength and wisdom of someone much older, much more attuned to this harsh world. Finally, as the shadows began to lengthen, they reached it. Not a grand canyon, but a deep, narrow wash, its sides steep and rocky, offering blessed shade and concealment. It was a welcome scar on the flat, open face of the desert. They scrambled down into the wash. The air was cooler, still. High above, a sliver of the blue sky was visible. It felt like entering another world, hidden and safe. Jarek found a small overhang, offering even more protection. He spread a hide on the ground. "Rest here," he said. Sarah sank onto the hide with a groan of relief. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed. Her feet throbbed, but she was out of the sun, hidden. Jarek sat near the entrance to the overhang, watching the world outside. He was vigilant, his gaze sweeping the rim of the wash. "Thank you, Jarek," Sarah said, her voice soft. He nodded, not looking at her. His focus was absolute. They ate the dried meat and berries Nahili had packed. It wasn't much, but it sustained them. As dusk settled, the desert cooled further. Stars began to appear in the narrow strip of sky above, impossibly bright in the absence of any other light. Sarah lay on the hide, listening to the sounds of the desert night, the distant cry of an owl, the whisper of wind over the rocks. She thought of Ben again, a pang of grief sharp in her chest. Was he alive? Had he found help, or had he perished somewhere out there, alone? The vastness of the land felt immense and indifferent to human sorrow. She thought of Nahili. What had happened at the camp? Had the men left? Had there been violence? The uncertainty was agonizing. Nahili had shown her such unexpected kindness, such fierce protection. Sarah owed her everything. Fear for Nahili and her people mingled with her own anxiety about the future. Where would she go from here? How long could they stay hidden? What about the baby, due any time now? She must have drifted to sleep because she woke with a start. It was still dark, but something was different. Jarek was gone. Panic flared anew. He had left her? Abandoned her? Just when she had begun to trust. Then she heard a soft sound from the entrance of the overhang, not Jarek's quiet movements, someone else. Sarah tensed, every muscle rigid. She reached instinctively for the small, sharp stone she had picked up earlier, a pathetic weapon. A figure stepped into the overhang, silhouetted against the starlit sky. Not a boy, a woman. Sarah's breath hitched. Nahili. Nahili sank down beside her, her movements tired. She carried a larger bag now. "Nahili," Sarah whispered, relief washing over her. "You came back." Nahili nodded, a weary smile touching her lips. "Jarek guided me," she said, her English slower now, softer. "He is good son." "What happened?" Sarah asked, urgency in her voice. "The riders?" "They left," Nahili said. "We talked." She didn't elaborate, but the set of her jaw, the weariness in her eyes, suggested the talk had been difficult, tense. "They took some things, not much." She paused, her gaze meeting Sarah's. "They wanted you. They said you were kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" Sarah was indignant. "That's not true. I was dying." "They do not care," Nahili said simply. They see what they want to see. She touched Sarah's belly. They said, your husband is looking. He has men with him. Sarah's heart leaped. Ben, alive. But with men like those who had come to the camp, the thought brought a different kind of fear. Men who saw Nahili and her people as enemies, as things to be robbed or worse. If Ben was with them, had they poisoned his mind? Had they taken advantage of his desperation? Where? Sarah asked, her voice urgent. Where are they? North, Nahili said. They followed the wagon tracks. They did not think you would go south. She looked at Sarah, her expression complex. They said, your husband offers reward for finding you. A reward for her. The thought felt crude, transactional. Was that all she was to these men? Something to be found for money? And Ben, was he desperate enough to ride with men like that? I cannot go back there, Sarah said, shaking her head. Not to those men, not to the prejudice, the potential violence they represented to Nahili's people. Not with them. Nahili nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. No, she agreed. Not with them. She opened the bag she had brought. Inside were more hides, dried food, water, a small pot, a flint and steel, and a soft, woven blanket. You stay here, she said. Hidden. It is a safe place. I will bring what you need. You would do that? Sarah looked at her, astonished. After everything, the risk, the confrontation, Nahili was still offering help, protection. Nahili met her gaze, her eyes steady in the dim light. You carry life, she said again. I will not let the land or the hate take it. She paused, then added, and Jarik, he needs a sister or brother. A faint smile touched her lips. Sarah felt tears welling up again, but these were different. Not tears of despair but of overwhelming gratitude, of awe at the unexpected kindness shown to her by a woman she had been taught to see as an enemy. Nahili was offering her not just survival, but sanctuary, a chance at a future, at a home in this harsh, beautiful land. They spent the next days hidden in the canyon wash. Nahili came every morning and evening, bringing food, water, checking on Sarah. She moved silently, cautiously, ensuring they were not seen. She taught Sarah how to build a small, smokeless fire, how to gather edible plants in the wash. She shared stories of her people, of the land, of the cycles of life and death that governed their existence. Sarah, in turn, spoke of her life back east, of the dreams she and Ben had for a life on the frontier, dreams that had dissolved in the heat and dust. She spoke of her fear, her grief, her desperate hope for the baby. Nahili listened, her presence a quiet comfort. The world outside their hidden canyon felt distant, a place of noise and anger and danger. Inside, there was a fragile peace, a bond forming between two women from different worlds, forged in shared vulnerability and unexpected compassion. As Sarah's time drew near, Nahili spent more time in the wash. She prepared a soft bed of hides, gathered clean water. She taught Sarah breathing exercises, traditional methods for easing pain. Sarah, despite her fear of the impending birth, felt a sense of calm knowing Nahili was with her. This woman, the enemy of her people, was the only person she trusted to see her through this most vulnerable of moments. When the contractions began, Nahili was calm and capable. She guided Sarah, encouraged her, her voice a steady presence amidst Sarah's pain and fear. Hours stretched into a night of struggle. Sarah cried out, not caring about the sounds, focused only on the monumental task before her. And then, finally, with a final push, a cry filled the small canyon. Nahili took the baby, cleaning it gently, wrapping it in a soft hide. She placed the tiny, squirming bundle in Sarah's arms. It was a boy, small but strong, his face red and wrinkled, but utterly beautiful. Sarah held him close, tears streaming down her face, tears of pain, exhaustion, and a profound, overwhelming love. A son, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his soft head. Nahili smiled, a wide, joyful smile that transformed her face. Life, she said, her voice full of emotion. The land gives. She helped Sarah clean up, saw to her needs with a quiet efficiency born of experience. As the first rays of dawn touched the rim of the canyon, Sarah lay exhausted but content, her son sleeping peacefully in her arms, Nahili sitting quietly beside her, watching over them. They stayed in the canyon for another week, Sarah recovering her strength, learning to care for her son under Nahili's gentle guidance. Nahili brought them food, clean water, softer hides. She taught Sarah how to swaddle the baby, how to nurse him. She shared her knowledge of the land's bounty, showing Sarah which berries were safe, which roots were edible. One morning, Nahili arrived with a serious expression. "They are gone," she said. "The searchers, they rode north, assumed you were not here." Sarah felt a complex mix of relief and sorrow. Ben was gone. Searching for her, yes, but likely with men she couldn't trust, his mind perhaps clouded by grief or manipulation. The life she had envisioned with him seemed irrevocably lost, a casualty of the harsh land and the cruel prejudices it seemed to amplify. "What do I do now?" Sarah asked, looking at her son, then at Nahili. She had no wagon, no supplies, no place to go. And she couldn't imagine leaving the woman who had saved her, who had helped bring her son into the world. Nahili looked out of the overhang, her gaze sweeping the vast empty landscape. When she looked back at Sarah, her eyes were warm, resolute. "You stay," Nahili said, "with us." Sarah stared at her, stunned. "Stay? In your camp?" Nahili nodded. "It will be difficult," she admitted. "Some do not forget, but you are protected. By me, and by the life you carry." She gestured to the baby. "He is new life, not touched by old hatreds." A lump formed in Sarah's throat. It was an offer of acceptance, of belonging, from the people she had been taught to fear. It was a challenging of every assumption she had grown up with. It was terrifying, and it was home. Not the home she had planned, the white picket fence, the farm on the prairie, but a home built on resilience, on unexpected kindness, on the shared language of motherhood and loss, forged in the crucible of the harsh desert. "But my husband?" Sarah asked, the ghost of Ben still lingering. Nahili was silent for a moment. "The land decides," she said finally, her voice gentle. "If he is meant to find you, he will find you here, but you must live for the life that is here." She gestured to the baby in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked down at her son, his tiny face peaceful in slumber. He was her future, and Nahili, the woman who had saved them both, was offering her a path to that future. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice firm, "we will stay." Nahili smiled again, that rare, beautiful smile. She reached out and gently touched the baby's cheek, then Sarah's arm. In that touch, there was no longer the stranger, the enemy, but a sister, a protector, a friend. They left the canyon wash shortly after, Nahili carrying the baby, Sarah walking beside her, a little stronger now, a little more sure-footed. They walked towards the north, towards Nahili's camp, towards a future uncertain but filled with a quiet hope. The sun still beat down, the land was still vast and unforgiving, but Sarah was no longer alone. She was with family now, a family she had found in the most unexpected place, among the people she had been taught to see as enemies. It was a life born of hardship, a bond forged in fire, a testament to the enduring power of connection and the possibility of acceptance in a world quick to judge and divide. The desert had taken much from Sarah, but in return, it had given her something precious and unexpected, a second chance, a safe harbor, and the quiet strength of a bond that transcended difference. Rooted in the fierce, shared instinct of mothers protecting their young against the harshness of the world.